Hello, and welcome to episode 8 of the Rollercasters podcast. Say hello, Zach.
Hello.
Hello. This is the first episode with both of us in a while, and I am very, very, very excited to get back into the rhythm of talking about roller coasters with my friend Zach here. And we have a very exciting topic to discuss on this episode because I have finally made my trip to Cedar Point. We have talked about Cedar Point on the podcast before, and it has always been with the asterisk of we can't really discuss this park in depth until Chris goes. And I finally went a couple weekends ago, and I had the time of my life. And if you are a roller coaster enthusiast, an amusement park enthusiast, you definitely know what this park is all about. And it has been known for most of its history as the roller coaster mecca of the planet. They call it America's Roller Coast. It's just known for its great coasters. And I got to finally find out what all the hype was about in person. And it actually exceeded my expectations, shockingly enough. Zach, I know you have attended at least once. I don't even know how many times you've been. Do you want to talk about what your experiences have been like with the good old Cedar Point?
Yeah, so obviously the park is more fresh on your mind. And the last time I was there was 2012, the year before Gatekeeper. So lots of coasters I have not been on, but lots I have, luckily. And I believe I've been there, I want to say 4 times before that. I went the year before that, and then the other 2 times was when I was super young, almost too young not to remember most of it. And then the other one was when I was in grade school at some point. So there's a lot of coasters that aren't there anymore that I've been on as well. But speaking on my last trip in 2012, that I was definitely an enthusiast at that point, and I can say I was very much enjoying it. A lot of the coasters were kind of my first big coasters too, because before that, the only other parks I had really been to were Kennywood, obviously, and then Busch Gardens and King's Dominion before that. So I hadn't been around to many parks before my Cedar Point trip, and a lot of those coasters were on a much larger scale than anything I've been on before. So
See, I'm partially jealous, but partially not, because you've gotten to go more times than me. But because I've gone more recently, I've gotten to ride everything. So I'm jealous of the quantity, and also that you get to ride stuff that I've never ridden before and will never ride. In speaking of the now defunct coasters at the park. But yeah, you definitely have a more thorough resume of experiences with the park. And what I will say that really, really surprised me, and I went with Taylor, and I feel like I've talked about Taylor at amusement parks enough on this podcast by now that, the listeners should have an idea that she likes roller coasters. She loves some roller coasters very much. But for the most part, she's definitely not an enthusiast. And so she looks for very different things in an amusement park. And when I made the suggestion that we go to Cedar Point for our fall vacation this year, it was a little iffy. I felt like she was agreeing to it more because she knew how much it meant to me, and less because she wanted to experience it for herself. But this park ended up being insanely charming, really high quality, across the board. I've been to Cedar Fair parks before, and I don't really have anything bad to say about them, but in comparison, they're kind of dumps. Cedar Point was just immaculately well kept, and all of the food that we had was good. We ate a lot of different stuff. They had a lot of options, for dietary restrictions, which was kind of shocking. They have a really good flat ride collection. Not that I indulged very much in that. But you know, like Taylor got me on some stuff that weren't roller coasters. And the beach is like marvelous, like actually beautiful. And the whole setting is just really stunning. That you know, we pulled up, we got there on Friday afternoon to check into our hotel, which like really short side note, I got into a car accident like 10 minutes from Cedar Point, like on my way there, like the trip I've been looking forward to the most pretty much in my entire life. And we were at a light getting off the highway to like turn onto the road that takes you straight down the peninsula, and someone crashed into us. So the trip didn't get off to a good start, but I definitely forgot that happened like a couple hours into being in the park because I was having such a good time. So it definitely got balanced out, but you know, if you've stayed at Breakers, the resort, you know that like the route to get to Breakers takes you around the entire like outskirts of the park.
Yeah.
And so you drive past the Millennium Lift Hill, which is like breathtaking. It's like unreal, like up close. And then now you drive past like most of, if not all of Steel Vengeance, like back to back, you pass Maverick and you can see the, like most of the layout, like with the rock work and the water features and everything. It's like actually beautiful. And then you get to drive past Steel Vengeance. And so like, I probably almost got into a second wreck, just driving around the peninsula, like, you know, rubbernecking all of these roller coasters that I've watched POVs for like 100 times a piece. And it was really exciting, and yeah, it was beautiful. The resort was really nice. We had a good experience, like, you know, from the get go. And we got the like free Friday evening admission, which I kind of felt like was a throw in when I booked my trip. And then I ended up getting like almost all of the credits that night. Just from like 6 to midnight, for like the haunt session. And so, yeah, it was like, I don't know, just like a perfect trip, I would say, like outside of like, you know, the previously aforementioned car accident, which ended up not really putting a damper on things somehow because the trip was that good. But I was just I was awestruck by just how perfect this place is. And just seeing the skyline, you know, coming down the road, it's everything that everybody says it is. And I'm not saying anything that hasn't been said before, but I want to validate, you know, those opinions that this place is just truly, truly, truly something special. It is a pretty perfect park.
It's, I think to go back a little bit, the drive up is what I was going to point out. It's like one of the most like, I feel like it's safe to say, for us at least, it's probably the best skyline
Easily.
for any park that we've seen, like approaching the park. And then you have the sign and everything, and it's just all like basically an enthusiast dream, I would say, is pulling up to that park. It doesn't seem real. Like all the coasters like towering over, and you can see like somehow you can see like everything, and it doesn't look cluttered or ugly. I don't know how it does that, because I guess when I think about it, for how many coasters are there and everything, and it's basically one giant flat area. But it's not ugly somehow.
Well, the park is huge. Like I will say that I'm in the habit of like, you know, making laps. You know, like if I go to Busch Gardens, I probably make that lap 4 to 5 times during a normal visit. And Cedar Point is much bigger, much bigger. Like it's not the sort of thing that you glance at like the wait times on the app and you're like, oh, Steel Vengeance is only a 15-minute wait, we should go over there. But you're over at like Raptor, like it's gonna take you enough time that by the time you get back to the back of the park, it's gonna be longer than 15-minute wait. Like
yeah, it's very big park.
Yeah, and they space things out really well. I completely agree with that. That for the sheer quantity of roller coasters and rides, like yeah. I did not feel like things were piled on top of each other in almost any way.
No, and I think before I went, in my head, just because of how many coasters were there, even when I went, they they've obviously always had a huge number of coasters in the park, but in my head, just from like taking that into account and knowing it's on a big slab of flat land, I felt like I was expecting to pull up to something like, I don't know how to explain it. Like in my head, it was like America's Blackpool Pleasure Beach, where I was expecting like things to be on top of each other.
Right.
And I mean, don't get me wrong, the way they do that, the way that park is very impressive with how things overlap and stuff, but I don't think it's very appealing to the eye as far as how it looks.
Yep.
It's definitely a case where it's appealing because it's impressive how they did it and stuff, but I wouldn't call it like pretty.
The Cedar Point skyline is certified pretty.
Yeah.
It is crazy.
Cedar Point is definitely pretty.
But yeah, no, I mean, it really is what it's cracked up to be. And we actually got, just as a side note, before we jump into the coasters here, we actually did get the opportunity to do some of the haunt stuff as well, which is, I won't say it's not my cup of tea, but if I know how many hours I have at Cedar Point, I'm going to spend it riding the rides. And so I wasn't really planning to do much of the haunt stuff. But by Sunday, I felt like I had kind of gotten most of my fill. And I decided, that it would be a good time to do some of the houses. And I will just say that, the cool part about the houses was that you got really cool views of some of the coasters. Like one of the houses basically takes you to the infield of Steel Vengeance, which was really cool while we were waiting in line. So I got some cool views and got to take some cool pictures. But also the houses were really good. The scare zones were really good. All around, that was a great event. And I'm like, I've always done Hallow Scream at Busch Gardens, and this was definitely of a higher quality. And I did Hallow Scream at Busch Gardens this weekend, and I can confirm that it was definitely of a higher quality at Cedar Point. So yeah, we had a great trip. It was really, really awesome. I could talk about it forever. I'm still kind of riding off of the happy chemicals that I got from that trip. But that's not quite what this episode is about. We want to talk about these roller coasters. So we're going to go in alphabetical order. Excuse me. We're going to go in alphabetical order here. And as you've probably heard, or as we've mentioned, Cedar Point makes it a habit of trying to break records when they install new roller coasters. So they always want to have
their thing, huh?
Yes, it is absolutely their thing. They want to do tallest, fastest, longest, whatever, firsts in many categories. And so when we talk about this, we're also going to highlight kind of like what, and you'll kind of pick up on when they started doing that as well. But we're going to highlight, what records they broke, what records the park claimed they broke. That's something that's occurred before. But we'll kick it off with actually the oldest coaster in the park, which is Blue Streak. And this is a Philadelphia Toboggan Coasters, out and back Woody, built in 1964. I really like it visually because it's painted baby blue, which, probably 99% of wooden coasters are simply wooden colored. They're brown. And so this one was painted a nice shade of blue. It definitely has that classic feel. I thought it was super smooth for being relatively old, especially in comparison to some of the other rides in the park. Got some decent airtime on this. I don't have a whole lot to say. It definitely wasn't one of my favorites. Wasn't one of my favorite Woodies either. But I'm glad it's in the park. It definitely gives them some variety in their lineup. And it was a fun little coaster.
Do they still change the name for Halloween?
Yes, it was called
Boo Streak.
Boo Streak. Yeah. And actually this was one of those ones, and just as another note of kind of how Cedar Point I feel like is a tier above other parks, is that like the operations were spectacular. I mean, like, there's no other word for it. Like, there were certain rides where the ops were actually just like sprinting to get trains out. And like, with the sheer number of people that were at the park, especially on Saturday, it should have been really long waits for everything, and that just didn't happen, mainly because the operations were awesome. And we're like, I went to Dorney Park like a month or two ago, and they had like one train ops on a lot of stuff. Cedar Point had 3 minimum for most rides. And Blue Streak, the reason I mentioned it Boo Streak, is because the ops on this ride were being like very over the top in a way that I thoroughly enjoyed. Like, I thought it was really cute, really funny. But they were really playing into like the Halloween thing and the Boo Streak thing, and just making little jokes. And especially because of like the crowd that this ride caters to, there was a lot of families in line. It was definitely that extra little touch that just like made that ride extra good, because the ops were like doing basically above and beyond work, in terms of like customer service goes. But what are your thoughts about Boo Streak?
I believe I rode it once on my 2012 trip, and I rode it at night. And before that, I had ridden it, but I was younger the other time. As far as I remember, I mean, it's good for what it is. That's about all I can say about it, really.
Yep, that's pretty much my whole take.
Yeah, it's just kind of like, I guess, like, it's definitely like a respect ride for me. Even if it's not great, I know what it is and like what it stands for, and
yep,
it's got some history behind it. But yeah, and I guess the other thing to point out is currently it's the only wooden coaster in the park, which is pretty weird.
I don't know how I didn't even think about that, but that's true. Damn.
Yeah, not when I went. Currently and when you've been there, it's only wooden coaster, yes, which is very weird in America. I feel like.
I don't want to start a tangent, but they need a GCI or a gravity group. Put a large scale GCI in the spot where Wicked Twister is currently standing.
Oh no. How many YouTube videos can you find on that already?
Here's my suggestion for Cedar Point. RMC Wicked Twister. Next question.
RMC Blue Streak.
Yeah, RMC Blue Streak. Yeah, or add another Intamin Blitz. That seems to be a good idea. But yeah, do you want to introduce the next one? It's the ride that I hated the most at Cedar Point.
Actually at the bottom of my list too, whenever we get to that. But next one is Cedar Creek Mine Ride. Rough. Does nothing. Sorry, Arrow, I love you, but this ride is not it.
Yeah.
I don't know what else to say about it. It's boring. The trains are like uncomfortable.
It hurts so bad.
I don't know if they changed it at all, but like
no,
it just has this like plastic couches in it, right?
It like really, I don't know why I didn't know this going in. I guess I just hadn't really heard much about this ride in particular, since it's really such a nothing ride, as you said. But it really hurt to the point where like I didn't even consider, like, it was a walk on all weekend, of course, and I didn't even consider getting back in line for this thing once I got my credit. Like the environment is really nice. Like, I feel like
station's cool.
The station is cool. Like the area that it travels around is really pretty to look at, but it really genuinely doesn't do anything. And I've ridden mine trains that like do stuff, and this one definitely doesn't. And the transitions are like maybe the jankiest of any Arrow mine train I've been on. And yeah, like, it hurt my knees, it hurt my thighs, like it just crushed my entire like waist area. Which makes no sense. Like, there's no reason that a ride like this should beat you up that bad, but it was rough.
Yeah, it throws you around a good bit. I guess to give it some slack, it is one of the early ones for sure, because it was 69, I believe. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, it's an older one, but I mean, it really just does nothing except beat you up.
Yeah. I won't say it was disappointing because I definitely didn't have any expectations for this one, but it was one of those ones that I kind of thought like maybe Taylor will really like this because it's like scenic. It's like basically just like a janky like monorail or something, like a tram. You're just like going to like see the views, but like we both really disliked it. Like I put it
Not
at the
fun.
bottom of my list and didn't even think about like anything else being worse because it was not good.
I mean, it was rough back when I went, so I can't even imagine what it's
Yeah.
like almost 10 years later.
Like every single arrow on the planet, even like the good ones have janky transitions, but like this was something else. Like there were some times where like it felt like the train was gonna fall off the tracks. Like it was that bad. But anyway, enough about that, you know,
Yeah,
quote
let's
unquote roller coaster.
get away from that one, huh?
The next one is another arrow, but this was one that I actually really liked, which I was really surprised about. I did not expect to like it that much, and I thought
didn't
it
wanna
was
say
sick.
anything. Yeah, I did not want to say anything to you before you went because I felt like it was gonna surprise you,
Oh, big time, big time.
and I
The
was just like, I
Go
want to
ahead.
tell him, but I'm not going to because I feel like he's gonna enjoy it more if I don't
It was sick.
spoil it.
It was really sick. So the roller coaster we're talking about is Corkscrew, which is the Arrow Looper installed in 1976. The record that this coaster broke was that it was the first roller coaster on Earth with 3 inversions, and it has a your normal vertical loop and and 2 corkscrews over the midway, which like honestly, the corkscrews over the midway are enough to like never do anything to that ride. It is like visually so fucking cool. like you feel like you can like high five people like in the corkscrews like on the ride as you're walking underneath it. It's
Yeah.
just a really 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 cool visual effect, and they light it up at night, and like it almost looks like vintage, like the way that they do it. And it's really really cool. And yeah, I did not this was definitely like in my mind as a one and done. This ride is like it ranks very high in my favorite arrow loopers for sure, but I think that it's almost like the perfect arrow to me because it does the stuff that I want an arrow to do. It's relatively smooth in comparison to some of them, and it's really short. Like really, really, really short to where like you go down the drop, you hit like a little quote unquote airtime hill. I don't think I got any airtime on it, but you go into the loop and then you hit the corkscrews and then pretty much the ride's over. And that's exactly like, that's the perfect duration for an arrow looper for me. Like, I don't want to go through all this extra nonsense. Like, you think about a ride like Anaconda, which I know we disagree on this, but like, I think unequivocally, like the second half of that ride does nothing and it does it really slow. And it makes all of the elements like a little worse because you're going through them like really slow and it's still banging you around. I feel like Corkscrew was just like right to the point. I got my 3 inversions and then the ride was over and I thought it was really fun. And this was one of those ones too where like Taylor looked at me after, and she's been on several arrow loopers and she hates them. And she even looked at me and was like, that was actually really fun. Like, I thought we liked it a lot. We rode back row, which I thought was fun. Like all the inversions were extra whippy. But yeah, this ride is kind of cool, which really surprised me. I didn't think I was gonna like this, but this ride was sick.
Yeah. I was going to say it's like surprisingly comfortable and smooth. And like you're saying, where it's at is just a big part of it too. You can literally like walk under the whole thing. And the fact that the corkscrews are over the paths and there's like no catch nets or anything. At least there wasn't when I went. I don't
There's
know if they
not.
changed it.
There's not, and it's really bizarre. Like I even mentioned that to Taylor. Like I think it's really weird that they're still kind of getting away with this in the age of like flying cell phones on roller coasters. Like it was kind of crazy that they didn't have anything underneath it. But I hope they leave it that way. It was super cool. Like I'll get domed by like, you know, somebody's keys or something from like what? It's probably like 40 like 40 feet in the air. I don't care. Like to preserve that look. Like it was very sick.
Yeah.
It definitely doesn't rank very high, like in my overall ranking. Like I will say that in advance before we get to that point of the episode, because I don't want that to be a surprise. But in terms of exceeding expectations, it definitely smashed my expectations. Like I still like Loch Ness Monster a lot better. I love Tennessee Tornado. Like that's way better than Corkscrew. But I don't know. I feel like people don't really give Corkscrew a lot of credit. I see it like really, really low on people's Cedar Point rankings. So this was a good surprise.
Yeah. So I guess that leads you into the next one because I can't really talk about it from personal experience, but
True. Okay. Well, I'll go ahead and introduce the next one, which is one of the newer coasters at Cedar Point, which is Gatekeeper, the B&M wing coaster installed in 2013. When it came out, it was the fastest and tallest wing coaster, and it kind of, you know, it's iconic. It has, in my mind, it has two iconic parts, which is the wing overdrop, and then it has the keyholes over the gate, which serves as like multiple head and foot choppers. And then it comes back around when it does its turnaround. It comes around again and has another sort of near miss moment with the keyhole sculptures, whatever you want to call them, structures over top of the gate. I never entered through the front gate because we went through the Magnum gate all the time because it was right next to the resort. But obviously I've seen countless videos and pictures of the entrance. And I think they did like an incredibly good job making this just like an iconic attraction, at the entrance. Like it looks so cool. And this is another one of those things, like just like the corkscrews over the Midway. It's just one of those things that like, I feel like Cedar Point has done such a good job of being so intentional with what they do and how they do it when they make additions, that like Gatekeeper looks stunning, like right on the beach. Like it's like practically on the beach. It's like the farthest, it's like the all the way at the front of the park, and it's like right on the edge. And then just going through the keyholes at the entrance is just a really stunning visual. And this ride is also really fun. This ride is really, really, really fun. So I'd only previously been on one other wing coaster, which is Wild Eagle at Dollywood. I like that ride, but I definitely didn't think it was anything special. And I know, again, not an unpopular opinion. People don't think Wild Eagle does anything, but I feel like a lot of people have a similar opinion about Gatekeeper, and I disagree. I think the wing over drop was really, really good. Riding in the back was extremely fun. Kind of getting pulled over that lift upside down, or over that first drop, upside down was really good. The near misses are awesome. The one after the turnaround is actually so convincing. Like it feels like you are going to smack into the side of the keyhole structure. And it's really fun. You know, I think it's like a comfy ride. It's really graceful. You know, it's not very old, but at all, but you know, I feel like it doesn't have any rattle to it. It's really beautiful to look at. I like the name. I like the logo. I really like this one. We actually rode this one a lot more times than I anticipated riding it. And we got a couple night rides on our last night there. And that was definitely something else, with the lighting and just like the moon reflecting off the water, you know, right by the beach. It was really, really good. And I love this ride, and it actually, another one that definitely exceeded my expectations. I kind of thought that I wasn't going to be too enthused by the, you know, B&M section of the park, if you will, up towards the front, you know, with the dive and the wing, especially, sort of being more GP pleasers than enthusiast coasters. But I really like this one. I thought it was really, really, really well done.
yeah, I guess my input on it is obviously over the park entrance and everything is like an iconic picture of this ride. And I remember when I went the year before, there was like some construction going on. Not much. I don't think it definitely wasn't announced yet. I don't think when I was there. But yeah, I wish I was able to see it getting built, but I was not. And I remember they announced it. I was so bummed when they announced it because I was like, I literally just went the year before, and I kind of knew that I wasn't going to be going the next year. Don't remember why, but I just knew I wasn't going to be able to make it out, and I was very bummed. And I guess I have yet to be on a wing, but from what I see is a lot of people complain that they're quote unquote forceless,
mild
boring.
eagle.
Yeah, but in my brain, I feel like they're supposed to be just graceful,
They are
drawn out
Yep.
coasters. So I don't get why people complain
Yep.
about that specific thing.
They have a similar effect on me as dive coasters do, which is that they're just really big and every element is huge and they're really graceful. And that was pretty much my whole take on wing coasters after riding Wild Eagle was like, I felt like I was flying. Like if that was the intention that I'm supposed to feel like I'm flying and it's really graceful, then they accomplished that. But Gatekeeper definitely showed me more of what the wing model is capable of. And I will say that I went to Holiday World earlier this year and Thunderbird was closed. So I didn't, apparently in a lot of people's minds, that's the best wing coaster. And I didn't get to ride it, so I don't have that comparison. But Gatekeeper easily far and away better than Wild Eagle. And I actually liked it better than like a lot of other B&Ms that I definitely think fondly of. So good ride. Definitely highly recommend. Everybody will ride it to get their credit, but I highly recommend re-riding it. And riding it at night was really good. It doesn't necessarily profile as like, a legendary night ride like some other rides in that park, but it was definitely worthwhile. It was really, really good. I did swallow a lot of bugs on that one in particular, but that's what you get at Cedar Point, especially at night. So
I guess before we move on, I want to point out too that because of where this park is and how the terrain is, I felt like this is the only park I've been to where every ride you can kind of like feel the height on.
Yeah.
Like even the smaller stuff, you like feel like you're that high.
Yep.
On everything.
I will say that's a really good segue because the next coaster we're going to discuss is one of the ones that I was very shocked by the height of. And it felt really big. It felt even bigger than usual because everything is flat. Like there's just absolutely no terrain whatsoever, which is, I like terrain coasters, but this is just a flat park. And that definitely played a role with the illusion of height, especially for some of these coasters. So I'll let you introduce the next one, but this was definitely one that fell into that category.
Yeah, that brings us to Gemini, the 78 Aero racing hybrid coaster, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't even know what you call it. So yeah, a lot of people mistake this for a wooden coaster. So if you were confused earlier in the podcast when I said Blue Streak is the only wooden coaster, it's because Gemini is not technically a wooden coaster.
It's a weird one too. It looks weird.
It's basically a mine train on steroids.
Yeah. Yes, it is.
I guess.
Very accurate. Except it's really good also.
Yeah, I liked it. I liked it a lot. I remember thinking, because Racer at Kennywood is my main take on racing coasters. I remember this one just had a very good pacing when I rode it, and for some reason I was expecting it to be rough, I think, especially because I rode it after Cedar Creek Mine Train, and I was looking at it, I was like, this just looks like a bigger version of like this Arrow mine train I just rode, and it's in the same park. And I feel like it's just going to be an even worse version of this because of how rough the mine train was. But I ended up enjoying it a lot.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's one of the more bizarre coasters I've ever been on. For all of the reasons that you already mentioned, it looks like a really, really big mine train that races. But I think, like, I don't know, the whole thing is really weird. Like, the station doesn't fit with the ride at all. The trains don't fit with the ride at all. The logo doesn't fit. Like, it just seems very odd. And it's very 70s, right? Like, the music in the station, it feels like it's all meant to be very futuristic, but on a coaster that is, like you said, a giant mine train. So it was really weird. And I will say the first ride I got on it, I definitely wasn't as fond of it because I think we were on Blue Train and the Red Train got stopped right after leaving the station. So I didn't get to race. And so I literally looked at Taylor like on the lift hill and said, we're going back again. Like, I need to get the racing effect. Like, that's part of what makes this ride so good. So we turned around and got right back on and then raced that time. And I rode Red that time. And people were high-fiving and talking shit to each other, like, all throughout the ride. Red side won. We had our victory. And it was just, like, surprisingly good. It was definitely still janky. I wouldn't call it rough, but the transitions are janky, like, you know, on 99% of Arrows. But it was super fun, and it was actually, like, more intense than I anticipated. Like, there were definitely some pretty good moments. A couple pops of airtime in there. They have the helix at the end, which was pretty good. Like, this was another one that, like, I definitely expected to like it, and I appreciate it for, like, its history and what it is, but it was, like, also more fun than I thought it would be. So definitely liked this one. The racing aspect definitely makes it what it is, I will say. Like, there was, like, a bunch of teenagers, like, flicking me off, like, all throughout the ride layout, which, like, what other, like, there's very few rides that you can get that experience on. So I like making eye contact with a 15-year-old while he's flicking me off and, you know, saying nasty things to me because we're on opposite sides of a racing roller coaster.
Yeah. And I forgot to mention, too, as we said earlier, Cedar Point likes to make record breakers.
Oh, yeah. This one broke some records.
When they built it, they coined it as one of the tallest, fastest, steepest coasters in the world, which apparently was not true.
Well, no. So
for steepest, right?
They actually claimed that it was the tallest, fastest, and steepest. But it wasn't. So there was actually a park there was a ride at the time, if I'm remembering this correctly, at Fuji-Q Highland, that was actually taller, by about 6 feet. Yeah. So they claimed it was the world's
all
tallest.
3 things were not true?
No, only the height. So they claimed that it was the tallest, fastest, steepest at 125 feet tall, max speed of 60 miles per hour. But Giant Coaster at Fuji-Q Highland from 1966 was 131.3 feet. So it was not the tallest roller coaster on the planet, but they claimed it was.
6 feet short, Cedar Point.
Yeah, that's not even close enough to, like, call it a mistake. Like, they just lied. But yeah, we're just, like, I feel like we're only talking about Arrows here. But we're getting through them. We're moving on to another Arrow, which is Iron Dragon, the Arrow suspended coaster from 1987. This one was weird.
What do you got to say about this? I'm interested. I've not talked to you about it yet. So.
I have quite a few things to say about this, but the first thing is that I found it really odd that this had the most consistent line the entire weekend. All weekend long, the line was to, like, the very start of the queue, which was really bizarre to me. This was one of those ones that I guess I just assumed would be a walk-on and I'd be able to get my credit whenever I wanted, but I actually had to wait. I didn't ride this one until Sunday, and I only rode it once. And as an avid Big Bad Wolf fan, I hate this ride. I hate it. It's
Dude.
terrible. So this thing literally does nothing. I honestly felt like I was on like a sky ride, like on the cable cars or something, except like over water instead of like over just like, paths and trees and stuff. It was really, really, really boring. Just having the previous experience of riding Big Bad Wolf as many times as I have, and like having almost
exactly.
like I have like a religious association with that coaster. It was that good. This ride was trash in comparison. It looks cool. Like I guess I will say that much. It's like fun to watch it go over the water. It like there's some really cool views, but this is not a good ride. If it wasn't for like how like aggressively terrible Cedar Creek Mine Ride was, this would have been my least favorite. And this might have even actually been my least favorite if you count in how much I love this model of coaster. And I've only been on Big Bad Wolf. I've never been on any of the other aero suspended coasters. So I have a limited point of reference, and I definitely rode the best one. But this thing sucked.
That's my thing. I'm so glad you said that, because I was like, when I rode it, I got off it and I was like, I think Big Bad Wolf spoiled me. Because this thing is so bored. I was so bored on it.
The second half was like, I was ready to get off. Like, I was just like, okay, like, why are we still doing this? Like, I don't understand why we're still doing this. And it was funny too, to like overhear, like, I pay attention to what like GP people are saying, like when I'm walking around, and a lot of people were just talking about how excited they were to get on the Iron Dragon. And I really did not like it. Yeah, it was disappointing, and I probably waited like a half an hour for it, which makes it even more insulting, because I could have spent that half an hour doing virtually anything else. But I got my credit. I will probably never ride it again. Definitely one of the rides that does not meet the level of quality set by other rides at Cedar Point.
There's probably some fanboys out there.
That's fine. That's completely fine, because those fanboys have their right to have that opinion. There's definitely some coasters
and
that
they'll never know, though.
Well, and this is like this is kind of how I feel about Loch Ness Monster. Like, for sure, that like I rank it way higher than anybody else. People recognize it as being a classic and recognize the history, but people don't think it's that good. I take people on it fairly frequently, and they're not very enthused by it. And so I get it. It's fine. And maybe I'm remembering Big Bad Wolf as being better than what it was, but I don't think so. You can watch a POV and recognize that it's just simply a better use of the aero suspended model. So,
dude, this thing just did nothing for me. I don't know what else to say. It's just it's you know what? It's not a coaster. It's like a hanging monorail in my head.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. It just gives you a tour of like that little lake. Like you get a couple cool views.
I felt like I didn't swing barely at all, and I was just meandering around above the water.
Yep. Not good. Definitely.
Sorry, Cedar Point.
Definitely not a good ride. Not a good ride. So that's that. But we're moving on to our last arrow on the list, the final arrow in the park, and it is a banger. Go ahead.
Yes. Excited to talk about this one. We got Magnum XL 200. So, some history behind this one. This one has showed up in our arrow episode, but it's a hyper. World's first hyper. Cedar Point coined the term hyper for it. And I believe it was not the tallest, though, right?
It was the second tallest.
Yeah, there was a taller coaster, but the drop didn't hit 200.
It was actually another Fuji Q Highland ride that was taller but wasn't a hyper. Which
actually Magnum's drop doesn't hit 200 either, so don't know how they
It is
coined it
194,
the world's first hyper, but they did.
194.7.
Yeah. But this thing, I love it.
Oh, yeah.
I loved it.
Oh,
The
yeah.
bunny hops on the way back. It's got the magic seat. Did you do magic seat?
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
I mean, I got nothing but good things to say about it. Surprisingly smooth. Feels very fast.
Yep.
And the trains are very cool to me. I remember seeing this coaster in like books and stuff in school.
Yep. This was definitely on a physics textbook of mine.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, this ride is legendary. It deserves to be. It I will say that it kind of beat my ass a little bit. Not from roughness, but because
Slamming you up
of yes, Zach and I have this in common. We have big boy thighs, and the lap bars on Magnum are very unforgiving for big boy thighs. And so Magic Seat was certainly the Magic Seat, but I couldn't handle Magic Seat anymore. Like I had to stop with Magic Seat. Like after Friday night, I probably rode it 10 times on Friday night alone because it was at the exit. And so I was like, Taylor, like, can I marathon this and I'll just like come meet you back at the hotel or whatever? Like she was like, sure, whatever. So I just kept riding it. And I like when I went to go like take a shower later on, I literally had like bruises on my thighs from just slamming into the lap bar over and over and over on those bunny hills. The hill, I think it's the second hill that goes into the tunnel or comes out of the tunnel. Maybe, I don't remember, is like probably top 5 most violent ejector moments I've ever felt. Like it was nuts. And this ride is really weird too. Like I don't even know what to call the element. There's definitely a name for it, but when you get all the way back to the turnaround, when it's turning you back around through like almost like a mini helix, I guess, it literally felt like the train was gonna fall off. Like I don't know what. Like I didn't expect that. It got a little freaky, especially at night. Like it was very bizarre. But God, the first drop is good. Back row is really good on this too. Like I know like car 1 row 3 is like the seat for airtime, but like back row is super fun and definitely more tolerable in terms of physical trauma. But this ride is nuts. Like everything, the station, like I feel like I'm like like I was born in 1990. So this coaster was built the year before I was born. And I feel like I stepped back into like the late 80s, early 90s. Like the music, the train, like everything. And what I thought was really cool is like the specific crew that I got, especially on the first night, there's definitely some enthusiasts among them. Like they knew they were working that coaster because they love that coaster, which I thought was super cool. It just added to like the experience that when I was in car 1 row 3, like looking like I was, I was making an enthusiast face. Like I was excited to go get on this thing. Like those guys were like sparking up conversations with me about Magic Seat and just like the history of the ride and stuff. It was so good and was a walk on the entire weekend, the whole weekend. Like I could have just ridden it whenever I wanted. It's like they turned over the keys to the ride to me to just get on it whenever I wanted, which was awesome. Super cool piece of history. And I just rode Steel Force like a couple weekend, like a month ago or whatever at Dorney. And that was the first ride of its type that I had been on. And I loved it. I fucking loved Steel Force. Steel Force blew my expectations away. Magnum is definitely like Steel Force, like the evil guy on the Steel Force sign like hit a crack pipe and was like, try this now. Like that's what Magnum was like. It was like so violent. It was awesome. Such a good ride. I love that it's like the airtime hills are like triangle shaped or something. Like they don't make any sense at all.
I just remember the third hill being one of the best moments for me on that.
Yep. Oh yeah.
Just because it feels like you're floating forever.
Yep. Insane airtime.
I've heard people say it, but having been on both, it's definitely something I think about. Is if they got the lap bars from Phantom's Revenge on these trains for Magnum, it would be incredible.
Well, as you know, I have no idea what the lap bars on Phantom's Revenge feel like, so I can't weigh in on
Best
that
restraints
particular
in the
thing.
world, in my opinion.
I believe you. I'd love to find out someday. Cough, cough. Kennywood Operations, cough, cough. But
Right.
yeah, this ride is sick. We've talked about it long enough. It's awesome. It's everything it's cracked up to be. I love it. And I know that this is also one of those rides that like a lot of people really love it, and like there's a decent chunk of people that hate it for some reason, and unequivocally you're wrong and you should shut up. That's my take.
The haters of this ride need to go.
You're wrong. You're just
There's
completely
a lot of
wrong.
times where I'm like, okay, you can have your opinion, but this one I never understood, never will.
Yep. They're wrong. It's a really bad
Wrong.
opinion.
Incredibly wrong. But we can move on to my baby.
We can
My
move on
pride
to
and joy.
We can move on to Zach's Pride and Joy, and an absolute banger. I mean, again, like easily one of my favorite coasters I've ever been on. We have Maverick, the 2007 Intamin Blitz, and I'm going to let you talk about what element they used for the first time because I don't even know.
So we talked a little bit about this before the podcast because we were trying to think if Maverick had like what firsts or only they did with this ride, and I believe the way they have I've seen them called corkscrews, I've seen them called 0Gs, whatever you want to call them, the sequence right before the second launch with the two inversions, what they call the horseshoe roll.
Yeah, the twisted horseshoe roll.
Yeah, I believe they kind of marketed that as like this first inversion of its kind type deal.
They didn't need to do any first of its kind or anything with this ride. Like this ride is just perfect the way it is.
And it definitely I think is the first uphill launch LSM when it was built. Lightning Rod obviously does that now. And I don't know. I could talk about this coaster for days, but I'm interested to hear your take on it because I did talk to Chris a little bit about his trip afterwards, but we were kind of saving it for the podcast, so I'm interested to hear.
Yeah, so I will say that I've been having some difficulty placing this one. Both in my overall Cedar Point rankings and like my greater, all of my coaster rankings. The sheer quality at this park is just unbelievable. It's really hard to like place certain stuff, but this was one that like absolutely blew me away for sure. Like on my first couple rides, but my first couple rides, they were assigning seats. And so I didn't get back row initially. Once I got back row, my opinion changed further. This is definitely one of the most intense coasters I've ever ridden. I will say that. And it was a one and done for Taylor because it just boomed her for 2 hours probably. And it's just, the pacing is actually perfection. Like it's one of the most relentless coasters I've ever been on, if not the most. I think like the rock work and the water, like everything, it's just a perfect environment. I loved everything about this coaster. I will say the big surprise for me was the second launch. The first launch, like if you've ridden this, the first launch just kind of gets you up to speed to kind of go over that first drop and like get you into the layout. The second launch is insane, like actually insane, mostly because of how hard
So
it
fast
flings you. As soon as you leave that tunnel, you're just getting whipped like insanely hard. Yeah, really, really fast. Really, really fast launch.
So you have like no warning.
Oh yeah,
You're
no,
just
it
straight
just
into it.
It rips you. It rips you out of that tunnel. Yeah, this thing's crazy. Crazy airtime. Like extremely intense. Like I can't say that enough. Insanely intense ride. And I got a series of night rides, I guess I should say, on Saturday night. And
I love this ride at night so much.
You want to talk about back row changing my opinion? Back row at night changed my opinion like permanently. Like I know like this ride again is one of those ones that to me just like doesn't profile as being that good of a night ride, but I was really super wrong. It was pitch dark throughout that layout. I literally was just at the mercy of the coaster. Like I did not know what was coming next. It was just dragging me all through the layout, like whipping my ass. It was so good. And I have one little side note, which is that I had an experience with a fellow enthusiast. And I know that the odds of him ever hearing this episode are 1 in a billion. But I want to say that if he hears this, this is a message, a very gentle, polite message from me to you. And this goes for any other enthusiasts that might be acting like assholes at amusement parks. Be better. We know that you know everything there is to know about these rides and that you know where the best seats are and that you know like what operations should look like and you get mad about one train ops and whatever. We all do. Don't be an asshole. This kid was assigned row 3 on Maverick. He was right in front of me and he was very clearly an enthusiast. He had a lightning rod t-shirt on and he had like his like strap on the back of his glasses. Like you've seen these guys before. He saw that row 6 was open, so he sprinted over to the op that was assigning rows and basically screamed at her and said, "Row 6 is open. Can I have row 6?" And she was like, "Yeah, I mean, do you want row 6?" And he scoffed and said, "Of course I fucking want row 6." And then went and ran over to row 6. And I had the unfortunate experience of riding row 6 with him 3 times in a row. And he was extremely punishing, really rude. Not a good example of what the enthusiast community should look like. So this is just a friendly reminder to be nice to your ride ops, especially those of them who are just trying to work a job and don't give a shit about what you think about the roller coaster that you're about to ride. But overall, Maverick is a 10 out of 10. Yes. Shitty enthusiasts aside, it's an amazing ride. It was my first Intamin Blitz, and I am going to hunt down others because it was extremely good. And now I will mute myself so you can say whatever you want to say.
My last thing I just want to talk about with this ride, because I could talk about it all day, but there's points in the layout I want to talk about because to me, I haven't rode it in almost 10 years. And this is a ride that's like stapled in my brain to this day. I can remember it very clearly, but just getting whipped over the first drop in the back seat is insane. Just because that transition is so tight. The part through the rocks where you the transitions between turns and the rocks felt illegal.
Sure does.
Where the train just literally flips over from one side to the other side. The airtime hill felt crazy. I remember that.
Yep.
And specifically the Stangle dive underneath the first drop felt crazy to me.
Yep.
And I feel like the way I felt about this ride is how I hear people talk about RMCs. I have not been on an RMC yet, but I feel like the way I felt about this ride is how people feel about RMCs for the most part is because it just feels out of control and like just everything you guys probably heard me talk about before when we did our like favorite coasters lists and all that, but this is like my ideal coaster right here, just feeling fast, out of control. That's like my main things. And it has the airtime as well, but
I definitely have trouble putting my finger on like what my ideal coaster looks like. But this definitely just specifically like manufacturer, like ride type, like what it does didn't profile as being like my exact cup of tea. It definitely has similarities in ride experience with RMCs. But it definitely felt like something that I wasn't going to be as keen on, but it was perfect. It definitely lived up and probably exceeded the hype, especially with those night rides in the back row. That was definitely I like to tell people that there are times on roller coasters where I experience tranquility, where I arrive in my Zen place. It's like the happiest I can possibly be. My brain is just flooding with happy chemicals. And Maverick Night Ride in Back Row definitely got me there. It was
Yeah.
pretty legendary. Yeah,
So
big fan.
I believe too. I wanted to ask you, or if I was remembering this wrong. Do the trains have names, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't remember
Meant
the
to
names
ask
off
you
the
that,
top
but
of
I
my
remember.
head, but yes, they are all named.
Yeah, which I thought was very cool. And I mean, Western is one of my favorite themes too because I just enjoy like the wood structures and stuff, like the buildings, and it feels very like a lot of theming feels fake to me sometimes. I mean, obviously it's all fake, but like I have a hard time getting like invested in theming. And Maverick, just like all the wood structures and the music playing, and
That whole area of
it's
the
one of my
park
favorite.
is that whole area of the park is exceptionally well done. And I actually just googled it while you were talking about it. I have the names and I have the reasons for the names. So Maverick has 6 trains total. They are Bart, Brett, Bo, Brent, Ben, and Sam, and they are all characters in a 1950s TV show called Maverick.
Yeah,
So there you go. And actually, it's funny that you mentioned it because another very top tier ride in that area of the park, also has trains with names, which we will get into momentarily.
I didn't know that.
Yep. And actually, I'll get into that later. I'll get into that later. But do you want
Yeah.
to introduce the next absolute banger in our list here?
Yes. Before though, I will say another ride that has haters for no reason.
Yes.
Millennium Force,
Yes.
world's first Giga,
Mm.
tallest and fastest when it opened as well,
Yep.
obviously. Um, but yeah, just there's a lot of things I can say about this ride. It's another ride I feel I've seen in books before I wrote it. Uh, Definitely like a pop culture. Can we coin that? Can we be like pop culture coasters?
It is definitely one. It is definitely one that people know about, even if they're
Yeah.
not into roller coasters.
But yeah, when I read this, I enjoyed it so much. The main thing I remember is like how crazy it felt, how exposed you are on those trains going up that lift hill.
Terrifying.
It's actually scary, yeah.
Yep.
And heights don't really bother me.
Yep.
And just being so exposed on the trains on this and going up that lift hill and being that high and seeing like the road especially right next to you, below you, realizing how high it is and how far you can see from it, it's quite the experience. My overall take on it is loved it. Don't get the hate for it. People call it forceless, which is insane to say.
That is nuts. Yeah, that is extreme.
Like,
The
were you on
positive
the same
G's,
roller coaster at the bottom of that first hill?
the positive G,
Out
like
of
there were
anything?
there were times where I literally felt like my body was melting, like where I was just smushed, like I was just gonna turn into a pile of like meat in my seat. Like it was so, especially at the bottom of the first drop. So crazy, especially in front row. We got like 2 front row rides. We mostly rode back, but our front row ride, the G's were like insane, like actually nuts. Yeah, I
I
definitely,
rode front and back on it, and I think I prefer front on this. I think.
I like back slightly better, slightly better. But I definitely echo your points about the lift hill, especially at night. It was actually downright scary. And I made the mistake of looking backwards on a couple of occasions and just like looking down the lift hill. And that was a huge mistake because it was really, really scary. But no, this ride is like, again, perfect. Like I wouldn't change a thing about it. The airtime on the first drop, like as another like general Cedar Point side note, I give full credit to the ops. I got stapled one time. Like the entire trip, I got stapled once on Steel Vengeance. And other than that, I did not get stapled a single time. And so they gave me a lot of room with that lap bar on this ride. And I was probably like almost standing vertically on the drop, like at one point. Like that's how far I came out of my seat. The feeling of speed is like very intense. Like the tunnel's really effective. I liked all of it. Really good airtime. And it's one of those rides that it's just going and going and going until you pull into the brake run. Like you slam into the brake run. Even like the last element like of the turnaround is really good.
Yeah, you're flying.
Yeah, it was amazing. It has a banger soundtrack. The song that plays in the station will be stuck in my head forever. Oh yeah, it's excellent. And this was also one of the best like overall like ride op teams that we ran into, and it was the same people like all weekend, and they were hustling. Like they were absolutely busting ass to get people out. Yeah, I loved this. Easily one of my favorite coasters I've ever been on. This was one of those ones that I wasn't sure, like it might fall a bit below my expectations, but it definitely like it either fell like right within what I expected, which I thought I was gonna love it, or you know, maybe slightly above even. Like I rode, I got really into Superman Ride of Steel at Six Flags America this year. That's been like one of my, up until like the Cedar Point trip, really one of my favorite new credits that I've gotten. I think it's really underrated. And Millennium Force, like it's a similar like style in some ways. It just does everything like 400 times better. Just truly spectacular. And it's so re-rideable. Like I could just get back on this thing over and over and over and over and over again. Yeah. Taylor loved it. This was her favorite of the weekend. Yeah, amazing, truly amazing ride.
It's 93 and it feels like it.
Oh yeah, no doubt. And it's those trains as well. Like do so much towards making you feel like you're exposed. And I love that. And it also feels like it could be brand new. Like it is 21 years old and it feels like it was just built. Like they take care of their rides extremely well. And this one definitely was like a step above that. Like you could have convinced me that it was like a 2018 edition or something because it just looks brand new. It rides very smooth. Everything is great about this one. Love it.
And I wanted to point out too, I forgot to, especially for our non-enthusiasts or people who may not know as much listeners, it was the first coaster of this scale to use the cable system for a lift. So instead of like your usual chain lift, it has a cable system and it's way faster, quiet, and I feel like it's just way more enjoyable going up the lift and stuff because it's very. I think the main thing is the sound.
You can have a conversation with the person you're riding with.
Yeah, while going up the lift. It's just like I feel like you really soak in how high you're climbing.
Yep.
More, just because it's quiet and you're like taking everything in, and there's no like loud clanking of the rollback thing on the chain, and
yep,
it's a very cool experience if you haven't experienced a cable lift yet.
I love Millennium Force. I got me a Millennium Force t-shirt.
Hey.
And that's a big thing for me. I bought 2 t-shirts that weekend, and
the logo is great. I feel like we didn't say that.
The whole thing, it's just like such an iconic coaster, and it definitely lived up to the hype. That was actually my first coaster at Cedar Point. We went directly to Millennium Force for early entry on Friday, and it smashed my expectations for sure. Loved it. But yeah, next up is another truly spectacular coaster, in my opinion. I actually don't really know what the conventional wisdom is about this one, but we have Raptor, which is a B&M invert from 1994. Another coaster that you could have convinced me was like relatively new because of the condition it's in. But this was the tallest and fastest invert when it opened, and it was the first to feature the legendary Cobra roll. And I loved this coaster. This became my favorite invert after one ride. I think it just does everything that other inverts do, but better. I'm definitely missing a couple that might surpass this. But this is presently my favorite invert, ranks pretty high on my overall ranking. It's definitely tall. Like you can feel that it's taller than like other inverts that I've been on. Very, very, very intense. The Cobra roll is perfect. Back row on the Cobra roll is like madness. Like it feels like it's trying to remove your brain from your head. I love the
It's
color
got that
scheme.
old B&M roar.
Oh yeah, it's very loud in a very good way. It's interesting too because I just just for a comparison, I just rode Talon for the first time at Dorney, like a month ago, and they actually filled the track with sand to keep it quieter, to get rid of the roar, and that was not a positive alteration. I definitely like the roar a lot better, and yeah, I got to ride this one like a shitload of times. Like I maybe 15 to 20 times over the weekend, and I loved it, absolutely adored it. What's your take on Raptor?
I loved it as well. I love always love the colors.
Yep.
The trains and the track, I feel, complement each other
The
very
pink,
well.
the pink and the lime green.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And a little hint of yellow even on the trains. And I guess what I would point out is the forces. It's very forceful.
Yep.
And I've been on 3 B&M inverts, I believe. Maybe more, but I'm thinking of 3 just to rank the top 3 I've been on, and it's not my first, but it would be my third actually. I still have Alpengeist at the top, and then I would put Great
close.
Bear second, and then this third.
Great. I will say that like Afterburn, Great Bear, and Montu, in terms of like United States inverts, are the ones that I'm kind of like eyeing, and I'm actually gonna ride. Knock on wood, as long as it's up, I'm going to ride Afterburn this weekend. So that might quickly change, but I actually rated it higher than Alpengeist, and I will tell you exactly why. And I literally said it. I turned and looked at Taylor and told her why while it happened. And I rode Alpengeist on Sunday. And so I really have like a very fresh comparison, and Raptor is definitely better for me. And it's for only one reason, one solitary reason, which is that the mid-course brake run on Alpengeist comes to a complete stop. Like actually, to the point where the last little bit where you're like cruising through like what looks like ski slopes with it, where they have like the snow sculpture on the ground, it's slow. It's downright slow. Raptor's mid-course was not turned on. It didn't even make a sound. We just flew through it. And so that drop right after the mid-course is insane. And the rest of the layout is so much more intense and enjoyable than Alpengeist because the mid-course doesn't do anything. Where like literally Alpengeist's mid-course brake run, like on Sunday, felt like a car crash. Like it was that abrupt. And they're very close in my rankings. I will tell you, they're only 2 spots away from each other. So I definitely love this model, and I love both of those coasters very much. But Raptor edges out Alpengeist almost strictly because of the mid-course brake run.
Yeah. And I remember the main 2 points of this ride for me where I felt like I was getting my face ripped off were the bottom of the drop out of the mid-course.
Yes. Oh,
where
yeah.
It curves into that corkscrew.
Yep.
And then the final helix felt insane at the bottom of it.
Oh, yeah. Strong gray out. Yeah, felt like my face was being peeled away. Like, oh, yeah. And so good.
I also remember where the queue is. It probably wasn't that filled up when you were there, but there's a point in the queue that's right at the bottom of that final helix.
I don't think I got close to that.
And I remember waiting in line and just like the train flying by there. just like completely almost 90 degrees was just so enjoyable to look at for some reason. I was just watching it like the whole time, just like getting ready to go on it. It was pumping me up quite a bit.
Love it. I love Raptor. Big fan. This was another one that Taylor like absolutely despised. Like I think she'd rather like
It's intense.
she'd rather like sit in a porta potty than ride Raptor, but that's why, is because of the intensity.
Yeah.
But
so the next
yeah, another B&M coming up.
Another B&M that I have I been on it? Yes and no.
Huh.
So this was originally Mantis, which was a stand-up B&M, which is the version that I rode, and I did not like it.
Yep.
Which I'm interested to hear Chris's take on the converted version of it, but I know a lot of dudes have complained about stand-up coasters in the past, and I was always, every time I've been on one, I've been all right. But
No,
for some reason, Mantis
suck
really,
ass.
Mantis really did do a number on my goods.
Yep.
And that's pretty much my only takeaway from it. I rode it once in my lifetime, and that was it. I rode it once, and I was literally like, not again, ever. And I mean, when I rode it, the colors even was not a fan of it. I thought it was ugly. The loop, I remember, was pretty cool.
It's big. It's really big.
Yeah, it's a very big loop, but other than that, I don't have much to say about this ride. I don't know.
Well,
I guess I mean, it was the tallest, fastest stand-up when it opened as well.
And had the most inversions.
True.
This is good. This
well.
actually worked out really well because you rode Mantis but haven't ridden Rougarou, and I have ridden Rougarou but didn't ride Mantis, so we can give just like a full picture of what this ride is all about.
I would hope it's better.
Well, I have some thoughts about it, that's for sure. So Rougarou was debuted in 2014 after being converted from the stand-up Mantis that Zach hated. So this is like B&M's thing with the stand-ups, right? Is that they convert them to floorless. I rode Firebird and discussed it on this podcast earlier this year at Six Flags America, and it is my least favorite B&M I've ever been on. I hated it with my entire heart. It sucks ass. It's a horrible coaster. I wish that it would go to a scrap heap. So I kind of expected to not be into Rougarou for a similar reason. However, Rougarou slaps. It is awesome. It's very good. It is really intense. The loop is awesome. It's absolutely huge. It's really smooth, which like my main problem with Firebird was that it was super janky and really painfully rough at times. And it definitely, this is a bit of a headbanger in some of the inversions, especially in the second half. But if you ride it defensively, even a little bit, you're going to be fine. Like I rode with some strangers at one point because Taylor hated this ride. And the kid next to me was like playing pinball with his head against the restraints and was complaining about it. But I just sort of braced myself and didn't get the headbanging, which like on rides that are really bad, like no matter what I do, I'm going to get my ass beat. But this ride was sick and it looks awesome. The color scheme is cool. The trains are cool. This definitely exceeded my expectations. Like I know this is becoming a theme. But I had actually seen somebody on the roller coaster, shout out our roller coaster subreddit. My favorite community on the internet. A bunch of stuck up little pricks like me. I saw somebody talking about how much they hated Rougarou, and somebody replied and said, "Can you tell all of your friends that Rougarou sucks so that the line will be shorter because I love it." And I was really interested to see which side of that I fell on. And I definitely fell on the love side because Rougarou was great. Like I said, really, really intense. Front row was awesome. Like definitely a really good front row ride. And it actually, it might be recency bias because it's been a while since I've been on either Dominator or Bizarro, but I think this is my favorite floorless that I've been on. And I'm not a huge fan of the floorless. Let me be clear. Like, it's not not among my favorite B&M models. But presently, Rougarou falls slightly above both Dominator and Bizarro. So take that for what you will. This ride is good. I think the conversion is good based on what you're telling me about Mantis.
Hated it. Felt
yeah.
like
And this ride is
beat
sick.
me up between the legs and felt like my legs were gonna be ripped off at certain points.
Yep, I believe it. I hate stand-up coasters. You know my take on this.
I guess too. I didn't mention that, but it was the first incline loop too, which was one of the cool parts about it that I did like.
Yeah, and that element is still very sick. Yeah, good ride. Really, really good ride. Surprisingly good.
For people who don't know, I guess, is that the incline loop is what it sounds like. It's a tilted loop to the side.
And it's fun.
It is fun. It feels kind of weird. I liked it, even though I hated the entirety of the ride. The incline loop was okay.
Okay.
That's about it. And the next one this is going to be a repeat of what we just talked about because I hated with every, like, even more than Mantis, Mean Streak beat the living shit out of me when I rode it.
Yep.
To the point where I had a headache. I usually, when a wooden coaster is rough, I am usually okay about it. I'm like, it's a wooden coaster. It has some character. It's gonna be rough sometimes, and that's all right. Mean Streak, glad they did what they did with it so much because every part of Mean Streak hurt. My head was bouncing off of like the headrest behind me the whole time. You got shook around the entire time, and it was just not fun. The size of it was very impressive to look at, though. I've never seen a wooden coaster look that crazy in my life.
The POV of this ride is unwatchable. That's how rough it was. I certainly never rode this, but like I've watched the POV and like especially the comparison POV just to see, and it is unwatchable because it's so rough. So I definitely can only imagine how terrible this was. And it was funny actually, like not like exposing my boss here, but when I requested off for this trip, my boss asked me where we were going, and she's from Ohio, and I told her we were going to Cedar Point, and she was all excited and was just like ranting about all these rides she liked, and she said, "Oh, but do not under any circumstance ride Mean Streak. That is the worst ride I've ever been on." And I just laughed and I said, "Well, interestingly enough, Mean Streak doesn't exist anymore." And I tried to even like sort of explain what they did to it, which is really hard to explain to the general public. And I tried to explain to her that it's like, known as being one of the greatest roller coasters, if not the greatest roller coaster ever built at this point. And she was kind of shocked, and I don't think she fully digested it. But even just like a former like native Ohioan, just from going on family trips to Cedar Point, knows how terrible Mean Streak was. But yeah, obviously most of you already know, and some of you may not, that in 2018, my favorite manufacturer, officially, Rocky Mountain Construction, did their hybrid iBox treatment to Mean Streak and built a masterpiece. I don't... Listen, my metric for like what belongs in like my top 3 to 5 is when I get off that ride, am I speechless? Like, am I sitting in the brake run speechless? And I will say that the worst ride I got of the weekend on this coaster was the first one I got. And it still would have ranked where it ranks. It still left me speechless, despite being the worst ride I got all weekend. I got stapled and the mid-course hit really hard. And it's become conventional wisdom in the enthusiast community that if the mid-course is hitting really hard, you're not going to get as legendary of a ride as you otherwise would. I got lucky because the second day we were there, the mid-course magically was turned off, like almost completely. And the second half of that ride was like absolute madness. Like, I've been on enough RMCs by now, I think, to kind of understand the different tricks they have in their bag. And this ride literally does all of them. Like, the second half alone could be one of the smaller scale RMCs. Like, Twisted Timbers is one of my favorite coasters I've ever been on. And you could literally put the entire layout of Twisted Timbers inside Steel Vengeance, and Steel Vengeance would then do twice as much stuff that Twisted Timbers doesn't do. It's just, also, I don't know if this, I never knew this, but row 11 is the magic seat. And I found this out by accident, just by like ending. I just was like waiting for back row, and then row 11 was open. So we took it. I was just like, screw it, I might as well just get on. And row 11 is the best row on this ride. So if you go ride this, I highly recommend, you should get back row, you should get front row, but you should really focus on row 11 because the airtime in that row is second to literally none. The first drop, the airtime on the first drop, the second hill, like the outward bank hill, is the best moment on any roller coaster I've ever experienced. Like, I just don't, it's one of those things that it took my breath away so much that like I can't compare it to anything else. Like, previously I would have told you the quad down on Lightning Rod, the Rolling Thunder hill on El Toro, the outward bank hill, it's like the second airtime hill you hit after the first drop, is the best moment of airtime I've ever experienced in my life. Like, unequivocally. All of the inversions are fun. It's just like, it got to the point where there's the last little run of bunny hills at the end. That almost felt like overkill. Like, the ride had done too much already. Like, to the point where like my legs hurt, and I was just like, I had been so thoroughly like whipped by this ride that by the time I got to the bunny hills, I'm like, okay, for fuck's sake, like, we get it. Like, you do airtime really well. We don't need any more. And then they give you like 5 more in a row or something. It's crazy. It really, it's everything it's cracked up to be. Physically the most intimidating, like jaw dropping. Like, I was awestruck looking at this ride. It's just crazy. The light package at night is insane. Everything about this is perfect. The station is like the worst station I've ever seen, which is really funny. Like, they just kept the Mean Streak station, and it's literally like a dump. Like, it looks like it would be on a shitty old like Dinwoody or something, or like on a Vekoma SLC. Like, they know nobody likes it, so they let the station get run down. But other than that, it doesn't even matter. It's not even necessary. Like, you could force me to like walk through like toilet water to like get on this ride, and I probably would. It's that good. It's just amazing. And just to touch on the records, the park claimed at opening that it broke 15 records, but fact checkers say that that's probably more like 10. So they may have, fudged a couple of those records. But it definitely does have the most airtime on any ride, with 27.2 seconds of airtime over the ride's layout, which, for the listener, I will ask you to sit still and count to 27 and just get an understanding of how many moments of airtime you're getting on this ride. It's crazy. I bought a shirt like after my first ride. We got Taylor got a Steel Vengeance shirt. She loved it. It is everything it's cracked up to be and more. I didn't think that this ride could beat my expectations because everybody says it's the best ride ever built. But it did. It's better than some of the top tier rides by a lot, which is like hard to imagine. Like, Maverick could be my number 1 in a different world, and it is much better than Maverick in my opinion. Just going to Cedar Point, it's worth it just to ride Steel Vengeance. They don't need like a banger lineup. If you put this ride at the shittiest park in the world, it would be worth going to that park because this ride is like next level. The POVs don't do it justice. Like, I could go on and on forever. It is madness. Absolute madness. Yeah. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. Shout out Alan Schilke. Shout out Rocky Mountain Construction. You are the reason that I continue to live. My reason for living. Oh, but now it's your turn to rant about a ride that I've never ridden. So go ahead.
Top Thrill Dragster, baby.
Yes, sir. Something I stared
Love
at
it.
all weekend, not being able to ride, which was really fucking depressing.
First coaster. Here we go at the first again. We're talking about Cedar Point. So, first coaster above 400 feet.
The Strata.
Tallest and fastest in the world when it opened. Does 120 in 4 seconds. And I loved it. I've ridden, I think I rode 3 times in 2012 when I went. And I rode the front, which felt absolutely insane. And I've ridden the back as well. Definitely prefer the front. Just launching at 120 miles an hour with nothing in front of you feels crazy. And the one time I rode it, I got a nosebleed. we came down and hit the brakes, and my friend looked over at me, and I was just like in shock from the coaster still. I was like, that was absolutely insane. And he's like looking at me, he's like, Zach, your nose is bleeding. And I was like, what? And I look down, and there's like just a trail of blood on my shirt. From my fucking nose from this ride. And I don't know exactly if, like, because I was in the front, I don't know if, like, I just took too much wind, like, up the nose or something. Or if it's, like, the quick elevation change of that ride. Like, how quick it goes up that hill. But either way, it was intense. Bet my favorite launch on a coaster to this day. And yeah, it's a short ride, but I feel like it's so unique that doesn't really matter. For what it does, it's fine.
So my only frame of reference for this one is that I've been on King Dakar like a shitload of times. But I've heard countless times that Dragster is the better of the two. And so I was really looking forward to riding this. Obviously, if you keep up with coaster and amusement park news at all, you know that this ride is closed for the season for an investigation into a very serious accident that occurred to a woman standing in the queue. She was struck by a flying metal object and was severely injured by all accounts. And I know these things aren't connected, but I'm wondering what your thoughts are on just this model and its constant downtime. I feel like King Dakar is down more than it's up, and I'm lucky if I get a ride on it. And King Dakar has had some incidents like this. I talked to Taylor about this while we were at the park, because let me just also say that I think what Top Thrill Dragster does differently, like physically, than King Dakar is that, like, you can't really get that close to King Dakar when you're walking towards it. Like, it's kind of like the top hat itself is kind of far away. You can literally like stand under the top hat at Dragster, and it looks wrong. Like, it looks like we made a mistake trying to do something like that. Like making a coaster go up a top hat at 400 and change feet. At 120 miles per hour. And I told Taylor, like, it's interesting. Like, this was built in 2003. I'm pretty sure King Dakar was not long after. There hasn't been one since. I'm wondering.
And I wanted to talk about that because I feel like, and what you just asked, like, what my take is on this model because of how many issues it has and stuff, and obviously the cost of it even, and then the cost of fixing it and all that stuff. I feel like we're not going to see another one of these.
Right.
Probably ever.
There was a lot of knee jerk reactions to the accident. I think where people were saying like, oh, this is the end of the Strata coaster. Like, rest in peace, Top Thrill Dragster, rest in peace, King Ka, yada, yada, yada. Because, like you said, they're very expensive to maintain. They have a lot of downtime. And then you've got sort of this increasing list of incidents, and this one being the most severe, certainly. I certainly don't buy into the rhetoric of this is the end of Top Thrill Dragster or King Ka, but I definitely think we're never going to see one again. Do you buy into that?
I think of this, like this exact type, yes.
Yeah.
Like just the launch, the top hat, that's it. The only other version of a Strata I feel like we might ever get is like some sort of like almost like a Strata version of like a Giga or something.
Right. Just like
that's way more likely than this.
Like a coaster with a lift hill that goes 400 feet.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. I don't think we're going to see I mean, but at the same time, you see like Red Force.
Right.
Like their newer take on it, which, as far as I know, has not had the issues that these two have. Or maybe not to the caliber of these two, because I'd never really heard about it. But
it's just food for thought more than anything else. And I just kind of like, I don't know, I reiterate my thought that like having ridden King Ka and having seen Top Thrill Dragster up close, it definitely looks like one of those things where like we got a little too confident, like as human beings, of like, you know what we should do? Like we should launch ourselves straight up into the sky at 400 plus feet and then straight down like at 120 miles. It just like, I don't know. It's one of those things that feels wrong when you look at it. It feels wrong when you ride it. And I'm just like, I don't know. It's just a bizarre model of roller coaster to me, but it was definitely crazy to see in person. And of course I would have ridden it in a heartbeat if it had been open. So I'm sad I missed that credit. One of two credits actually that I missed, just by, a couple weeks. But another credit that I did get, if we want to move on here, is Valraven, which is the 2016 B&M dive coaster. It is currently tied with Yukon Striker for the tallest dive. It is the fastest and longest and was the first with 3 inversions. My only frame of reference for this one was Griffin previously, which is at my home park. It's a ride that I really like. I feel like I like it more than most people do. Very enjoyable, smooth, like we talked about with the wing coasters, big, giant elements that are really graceful. And the dive is a one trick, but it's a good trick. I really enjoy going down that first drop. And Valraven was good. I do not like the vest restraints in comparison to the traditional over the shoulders on Griffin. And I've heard people talk about that a lot as being a real differentiating factor between some of the dive coasters. And I think that definitely made a difference. I didn't get a like smidge of airtime on Valraven. But it's a really beautiful ride. It looks enormous, just like Griffin does. Really smooth, really fun. I rode front row and third row. Both were good. I really liked it. I wasn't like crazy about it. It was definitely one of Taylor's favorites because it's, smooth and not that forceful. But definitely fun and definitely a good addition to this park a couple years ago. It's definitely a GP eater. Like people line the hell up for this ride for sure. Like all day, like for the whole weekend, it had a line. I don't know. I don't have any crazy thoughts about this other than I still like Griffin better. I think this ride could have done for like a splashdown effect or like something extra. But it's a good one. I liked it. And you haven't ridden this, have you?
Nah. My only my only thing to add is that I think it's really weird that there's not the bigger trains on this.
Yeah.
I've always thought that.
Yeah, this was 8 across as opposed to 10.
Yeah. And I also, I think this is weird there's no splashdown. or tunnel or anything of that sort. And also, I was gonna ask you, is there a point to that airtime hill with the vest restraints on this ride at all?
No. No. Simply no.
Simply
It doesn't
no.
it doesn't do anything. Like, I don't know. It's weird cuz like some of the coaster YouTubers will talk about this ride and just shit all over it. And people rank this pretty low on their overall Cedar Point rankings, and I do not. And I agree that the airtime hill does nothing. It has no airtime whatsoever because of the vest restraints, but that doesn't ruin the ride. It's still really fun. And this was another really good night ride that like the light package was really cool. Yeah, no, this was a good ride. And I actually liked it more than I thought I would just because people shit on it a lot. So I kind of assumed that I wouldn't. I'm excited to someday ride Shikra. Like, I feel like that's the only one, maybe Yukon Striker. I don't know. Like, I love Griffin, and I feel like this one didn't quite live up to the expectations that Griffin set, but I definitely liked it. It was a good ride. Yeah. And it's weird.
Like the paint job too.
It's
the
a beautiful
silver spine looks pretty cool.
It's beautiful. Like, it really is. And the trains are really cool looking. Like the theming is weird. Like, I didn't fully digest it, I don't think, but it's cool. Like, it's a really well done little plaza they have back there as you walk to the entrance. And like I said, it's one of those rides, and B&M does this extraordinarily well. It's one of those rides that you just walk up to and it's just so picturesque. Like, it looks awesome.
I mean, if you haven't seen a dive coaster from B&M in person yet, it's like one of the most, like, just the sheer size of the track alone is crazy to me still every time I see one.
Yeah, and that's part of it for sure. And like the first drop too, like it's a good looking ride. And I thought it was interesting, like I made reference to it earlier, but like there's just like one whole section of the park that feels like it's just B&Ms. Like the whole front practically is just like you have gatekeeper to your, like if you're facing the front gate from the inside, you have gatekeeper on your left, Raptor on your right, Valraven like, you know, a little bit closer. Like, it's just funny that like they put all their like new, other than Raptor, I guess, but they put their two new B&Ms like right near each other where you can just sit there and look at all the different models of B&M you could like, all the newer models of B&M you could ever want in one place.
I mean, too, you got like Raptor from the front of the park. You got like Raptor, Valraven, and then Rougarou. Like in single file line down the left side of the park.
Yep. But yeah, that leads us to a coaster that I did not get to ride. I missed it by a week. So I'll let you cover this one.
I think I'm more bummed. Well, yeah, I am because it's closing. I'm more bummed you didn't get to ride this than Dragster easily.
Yeah, I'll have a chance to ride Dragster at some point in theory, but this one I unless they move it to like King's Dominion or something, I probably won't.
Yeah, so this is Wicked Twister, which is now gone. Well, no, it's still standing, but you can't ride it, and it's leaving. Yeah, it's the Intamin Impulse. 2002 it was built. It closed earlier this month for good, and they are removing it. And it is the only one to have twisted spikes on both sides, I believe.
That's correct. And this thing was crazy to look at too. It's so big. It's like, I don't know how much bigger it is than Possessed at Dorney, but it is really big. And it just, I don't know, it feels like an important piece of the skyline to me, which makes me hopeful that they will replace it with something cool, because it's just, it takes up this big wide section of the skyline when you pull up to the park that just seems like an important space.
It is almost 30 feet taller than Possessed.
Okay. It looks much bigger. I don't know why. And I don't know. I guess I mentioned it in my solo episode that I thought Possessed was fine. And so I'm not sure what I would have thought about this one. And I'll never know, like I said, unless they relocate it.
I feel like I've been really lucky when it comes to impulses. Intimate impulse coasters, not like actual impulse.
With your impulses?
I thought I should clarify that for anyone. But yeah, I got to ride this, which has the twisted spike on both sides. And I will say sitting in the back row, going up the back spike is one of the craziest like experiences I've ever had on a coaster. It's just like to look down at all the cars in front of you and see them twist, and like for a moment you can see every single like seat on the train. It's just a crazy thing to look at. And then the other one I was on was Geauga Lake, when they had, who took that one? I don't even remember. Is it Steel Venom?
I'm looking.
Well, there was one at Geauga Lake in Ohio, and it was Superman something. God, I can't remember. It was so long ago. I was in 8th grade.
It's possessed.
Oh, it's possessed?
Yeah.
So yeah, I got to ride that when the holding brake.
Yeah.
Which felt very illegal. Just like that thing like stopping you on that spike and you just slamming into the restraint.
I'm jealous, actually.
You put your entire life, like, I know people say that a lot about roller coasters, where like, oh, my entire life is laying in the hands of this restraint. But in that specific situation on these rides, when you're on a vertical spike and it slams you to a stop when you start to fall to go back down, and your entire body weight like slams against the restraint, it felt terrifying.
I actually can't imagine what that would feel like, to be honest.
I was just scared. I've never been like that type of scared on a roller coaster before. It was just insanely terrifying. But yeah, rest in peace. We'll miss it. I wish you got to experience the reverse twisted spike.
Me too, man. It was difficult. It was one of those rides that I didn't think I was going to be that sad that I was missing it. And it was like the timing was really bad that like I missed the last rides by like literally a weekend. And I didn't think I was going to be that bummed about it, but seeing it, and they had it lit up and stuff still. Like I walked past it like 3 or 4 times when we went to do Gatekeeper, and it definitely bummed me out. Like just having like a standing but not operating coaster that I could have ridden just felt bad.
I'm really confused as to why they just didn't let it ride out the rest of the season. Because it can't be a coaster that is that hard to tear down.
Yeah.
Versus like other ones.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what they have planned. There's obviously rumors out there, and I won't entertain them, on this episode. But there's definitely some things that I would like to see go in that spot. But yeah, and then I would say the only other removed coaster from Cedar Point that I wanted to shout out that I'm just fascinated by, that is obviously no longer there, is Disaster Transport. That's one of those, and that's one that I figured you'd have some insight on. And obviously it's mostly just a bobsled coaster, but what they did with it seemed like such a maybe a swing and a miss attempt at like trying to recreate like some Disney level theming around a coaster. But I've always been fascinated by that one.
That's like my takeaway from it, was that like they tried like some Disney shit with this. It was cool. I enjoyed it. The only other bobsled thing I had been on was Avalanche at King's Dominion.
Oh yeah, they don't even seem like they're similar. Like
no, this one is a lot. It felt way more strange, I think, because it's just like the type of train that was on it and everything.
I will say that they still had Disaster Transport t-shirts
Really?
throughout the park. Yeah, which I thought was cool. Like they in the really big like main shop in the front of the park, they had Mean Streak shirts, they had Disaster Transport, like they had some of the defunct coaster shirts, which I thought was cool. And we ate at Melt, which is like a grilled cheese place. Yeah,
I didn't even know they had one of those in there.
Yeah,
That's crazy.
they do. It's like a full-fledged restaurant, like right in the middle of the park, and they had this whole mural of like all these logos of rides and coasters and stuff. And they had Disaster Transport, and then the Melt logo is actually like the Mean Streak logo, but it just says Melt, which I thought was pretty cool. But yeah, that gets us through the coasters. And yeah, I just want to like kind of just double down about my takes on this park, which is it took me way too long to get here for sure. And especially if you're on the East Coast, like just go. Save your money, book a weekend at Breakers. The early entry and the proximity to the park were definitely worth it. The access to the beach was worth it. The facility is really nice. It was just, there are very few places where I can say I had a 10 out of 10 experience, and Cedar Point was one of them. I rank it, obviously on Coaster Collection, I rank it number one, but like overall, like park quality, it's very, very high. I'm not sure where it falls, but it definitely competes with like Dollywood and some of the parks that occupy a very big piece of my enthusiast heart. But it was an amazing park. We had a great weekend. I can't wait to get back. I might have to do it by myself this time because I definitely punished Taylor into oblivion like all weekend. I was at the park for 14 hours on Saturday without leaving, and poor Taylor like went to the hotel room to take naps and stuff in between because I just would not stop. And I've never had more blisters on my feet from one day than I did on that Saturday. But yeah, it's a truly extraordinary place. And I give full marks across the board in just about every category. But I think we'll wrap up the episode with some rankings here.
Ranking, which everybody loves and asks for all the
yeah,
time.
and what inspired me to do this is that I feel like we don't do that enough. I feel like we've missed an opportunity to rank shit, and on a couple of occasions where we could have. And so I wanted
to, or we'll get yelled at
for sure. And it's funny because I watched like a lot of roller coaster YouTube videos, and there's been a couple there recently where I was just like mind blown by like some of the rankings that these guys came up with. Like I just couldn't imagine what they were thinking. So I wanted to offer mine, and obviously Zach, you've ridden some of the ones that are currently standing, and or majority.
4?
Yep. So you've got some missing, but we can compare our overall rankings here. And what I'm going to do, and I will say this with a big asterisk, that my like overall rankings change very often. There are days where I open my ranking sheet and I move shit around because I changed my mind.
I guess I'll go. I mean, I feel like I should go first because it's not current.
Yeah, go ahead.
And then you can kind of, because you'll give people an idea of like if they're going.
Sure.
What you think? Because I did put like the older ones in my ranking too, just to throw them in there. But my ranking would be Maverick number 1, of course, and then we got Millennium Force as 2, Dragster as 3, Magnum as 4, Wicked Twister as 5.
Wow.
Raptor below that at 6. Gemini at 7, Corkscrew at 8, Blue Streak, and then I got Mantis, Iron Dragon, Cedar Creek Mine Ride, and then last is Mean Streak.
Mean Streak, damn, wow. In the dumpster. Wow. Okay. Well, what I'm going to do for mine is I will say them in order of their rankings within the park, and then I will follow that with their place in my overall ranking, which again, I just changed this like 2 days ago. So these change frequently, but they don't change very much. So I will say that the second and third coasters that I'm going to name are kind of interchangeable. I cannot rank them, and that's why they are next to each other in my overall ranking, because I just can't quite decide which one I like better. But I will. I've had these ranked this way since my first rides on both, and I will keep them that way for the time being. But number one is Steel Vengeance, which coincidentally is also now my new number one overall coaster. It edged out Lightning Rod, El Toro, The Voyage, my 2 through 4. And I don't think it's close. I think that it edged out Lightning Rod by a lot for the number one spot, which I did not expect. But number 2, I have Millennium Force, which is my 6th overall. Number 3 is Maverick, which is 7 overall, as I said, but those are kind of interchangeable. I feel a similar fiery, passionate love for both of them. They're both perfect coasters. In fact, I would go so far as to say I think at this point my top 10 are all perfect coasters. I'm getting into that territory. So those are kind of interchangeable. Number 4 is Raptor, my favorite invert, at number 14 overall. Number 5 is Magnum XL 200, my 22nd favorite coaster. Number 6 is Gatekeeper at 27 overall. Number 7 is Valraven at 37 overall. 8 is Rougarou at 42. 9 is Gemini at 49, just barely sneaks into my top 50, along with Blue Streak at number 10, which is number 50. Corkscrew at 11 at number 67 overall. Iron Dragon at 12, number 78. And Cedar Creek Mine Ride at 13, my 98th favorite coaster. Does not belong in my top 100, but I need to increase my quantity to ensure that happens. But yeah, I mean, truly a great park with an amazing, not remotely, no other park is comparable in coaster collection. There's a couple floating out there that are like reasonably close, but not that close. This is the best coaster park on the planet, and I'm glad I finally got to attend. And I reiterate that if you have the opportunity, get to Cedar Point. It is a special place in every measurable category, and I absolutely loved my weekend there, and I'm already thinking about when I can go next. Zach, closing thoughts on Cedar Point.
I love it. I need to go back, and I think I want to go back and say the people that hate on Magnum and Millennium Force are crazy.
I agree.
And the people who liked Mean Streak, you need to be checked into a facility.
Yes, I think they've had too many concussions on that ride. They're speaking some bullshit. And I would actually double down on everything you just said, and then add in enthusiasts that hate Valraven. Also sort of fall into that category for me. And I would politely request that you stop being so dramatic about everything. One airtime hill investor straits is not enough to hate a coaster as much as some of you do. So
I feel like the haters of Valraven are like, I mean, even probably Magnum and Millennium are like the super spoiled ones who have been on so many things.
Yep. But yeah, for me in closing, I will say that I am going on another coaster trip this weekend. So I will probably have some, mini trip report kind of action coming up. I am going on 2 first time trips to new parks. On Saturday of this week, I am going to Six Flags Over Georgia. So I'm super, super, super looking forward to riding Goliath, which all of a sudden has emerged on the scene as being one of the best hypers, which is weird. But a lot of people have changed their opinion on that one, so I'm really looking forward to that. And of course, I'm looking forward to Twisted Cyclone, adding another RMC to my credit list. And then Oh yeah. Let me just also say unequivocally that like officially RMC is my favorite manufacturer, and it's not just to go back to like our intro episode where I wasn't sure and I said that I liked B&M. RMC is my favorite manufacturer, and that opinion is only going to grow as I ride more, I'm pretty sure. And Twisted Cyclone isn't supposed to be even one of the best ones, but I'm just so excited to ride another one because they're that good. But then on Sunday, my top 5, maybe even top 3 is going to get a little crowded, because I am going to Carowinds, also for the first time, and I am going to ride Fury 325, for the very first time in my life. I'm excited for that. I'm excited for Afterburn. I'm excited for Intimidator, Copperhead Strike, another park with a really good lineup. So I am getting another, 20 more credits this weekend. And if I stop on this just endless run of park visits this year, and that is the last new park I visit this year, I will finish this year with over 60 new credits. So I started this podcast by saying that I wanted to make it a point to attend more new parks this year, and make up for last year not being able to go to parks. And I feel like I have come very close to accomplishing my goals in that regard. So yeah, looking forward to that weekend. Be on the lookout for that. We've got some other like episode ideas / layouts, kind of in the oven, that we just need to sit down and record. So keep your eyes peeled for those. And as always, we appreciate you listening. If you have super weird, nerdy friends, like us that love roller coasters and music, tell your friends about it. I tell people in line for rides all the time about this podcast. And so if you met me in a line for a ride at an amusement park and you are listening to this, thank you for listening, and thank you for letting me punish you. And
be nice to ops.
Please be nice to ride ops. That is the message of the episode. Please be nice to ride ops. They are just trying to do their jobs, you fucking weirdos.
That's the message. Be nice to ops. RMC Blue Streak.
RMC Blue Streak. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.
Bye.